Lucy, you wanna come here and talk to the microphone?
She says no. Oh. So it came in pretty good from being over there, didn't it?
Yeah. Too, Helen, you would know that. He moved down from next door to you up there. What was his name? Had a printing shop. Had it up there first. Where
Was he the one that printed little paper?
Hank Shepard's place. He had it, then he moved his shop down here. And Al, well,
It's going now.
Okay. So I lost the first half of the thing because it wasn't working.
now this, where the church is here in that building, that was, what was his, he was highway commissioner, Russ Denegar's father. And he,
Albert.
No. Well, anyway, up there where they got this recreational building, that's where he kept his horses and everything that he needed for the highway. He bought a new team of mules, and we had a couple here in town, Jacob Coons and his wife, and Denegar named his mules Jake and Liz.
That was the one
Jake,
that lived...
Yeah, Jake was quite elated. The mules were named after.
That's one that lived up on Maple Avenue.
This is not old. Who built this now? Will Denegar and his second wife lived there.
That's right. He built it, I think.
It's a fairly new house.
Yeah.
Now this is an old house. This was what was his name? He was a well driller. He worked for Fred Rockefeller. His daughter married Joni Potts, second wife. I can't think of his name, but that's where he lived. Apparently, I guess he built it.
It's a real old house, though.
Yeah, it's an oldie. Now here's a little history, girls. This building set over here on this knoll.
This little house
That
here?
house right there, that's the old schoolhouse for the village.
Oh, you're kidding!
That's the old
My
schoolhouse.
Regents.
And it's set over there. And back in those days, as you girls know, I guess if you went through the 8th grade, you could get some kind of a paper and teach. And my mother taught school there. Then, this, when high school was built down here in 23, 24, then this building was moved over here. Again, Harry Phillips was in the picture and moved
Now,
over
wait
here.
a minute, Jay.
Yeah.
It was there before the school was built.
Was it?
Yes, because I came down here and took Regents.
Yes, that's true.
Sure.
That's very true. It was. Yeah, Jeremy Snyder was the principal.
That's right. It was a two-room schoolhouse, but he had the upper grade.
Yep, you're 100% right. This was my grandfather's tenant house. And in his old age, he moved in here.
What was his name?
Crawford Rockefeller.
Crawford Rockefeller.
He was the butcher Crawf. This was his original home here. And that's where he raised how many children here? Let me see, Emmy, Eddie, Elvie, Maggie. There were four girls. Then there was Tracy, Abram, Coffee, Homer, and Bright.
Wow.
So there were 9 children. They raised them all here. He had a barn up here, which is there yet. And then on down past the barn was the slaughterhouse. In those days, you went around locally and bought cows, calves, and sheep. And the butcher would butcher them in his slaughterhouse.
Well, is that bigger barn down there?
No, you can't see the slaughterhouse. It's down in the back.
Okay.
Jay, I'm sorry, but I didn't get his name.
Here?
The fellow that had 9 children.
Crawford. Crawford Rockefeller. Butcher Crawf.
That was your grandfather.
Yeah.
Crawford Moore or Crawford Rockefeller?
Crawford Rockefeller.
Crawford Rockefeller.
My grandfather.
Now, wait a minute. Butcher Crawford was Crawford Moore or Crawford Rockefeller?
Crawford Rockefeller.
Oh.
Lived right here. And up there on the hill was Butcher Lou. He was Lou Rockefeller.
Where?
Well, the old Carston place.
Oh.
Well, this looks like a pretty old house, too.
Well, the first one that I remember living here was Sanford Coons. He was a mail carrier. There was 2 Sanford Coons. This was Little Sanford. Big Sanford lived down the road. So there was Big Sanford and Little Sanford. And now who lived here before that, I don't know.
What year are you talking about? 1930s?
Oh,
40,
before that.
20s?
Yeah, before that, 20. Yeah.
Walt Miller was the mailman.
There's really no history in any of these places, to my knowledge. Some of them are new.
Yeah.
I always had a feeling that the house on the left was not where the doll was.
Yeah.
I had a feeling that was
There was a Lasher that lived there. I think he was the one that they used to call Fat Lasher.
That was
Didn't
down
he live-
here.
No, that's further down.
Oh, that's further down? I thought it was in that house.
because he was our mailman when I married Richard.
Mm-hmm. Well, these are all new houses along here.
Yeah, these are new.
All right, go on.
Now, we come to an interesting...
Yeah, now over here is where Big Sanford lived. He was quite a prominent man in town. He had a...
Now, is this little house here?
That was his tenant house.
Oh, that was his tenant house.
And he lived in the big house. And right here, on that corner, was a gas pump. They pumped 1 gallon at a time. But the 3 or 4 cars that were in town, they all came down here and got their gas. That was the only gas station in town.
All right, I'm going to pull off right here.
Big Sanford.
Now, Jay, on the right here,
Yeah.
wasn't there an old house right opposite where you said the tenant house was on there?
Not to my knowledge. Might have been. It might have been.
They ripped it down. They used to have that smoke bush in the front of it. And they kept it up so nice, almost Fisher's bought it. And
No, that's a little bit farther,
Is that a
isn't
little
it?
farther?
The
Okay.
one that,
Where they live.
where the Fisher kid started the fire.
Yeah,
Right down
it
here.
is,
Here it
yes.
is.
So I thought maybe Jay could tell us something.
Well, now that was a Dick house, wasn't it? The one that was here?
Yeah. Amos Dick. And he had a son, Lansing. And his daughter married Haraldsen.
Yeah.
They had, what, three boys? Yeah, 3 boys. Well, I guess they cleaned up the old
Oh,
fire.
yeah. Well, they sold it to that, the one daughter, Rose, and her husband.
Well, I go up and down here occasionally, but this is the first I've seen that building.
Yeah, that's the house that they
The
put up.
house on the left here. Is that where Fat Lasher lived?
That's right. Yeah. That's where he lived. His mother lives up the back, and I had a nice chat with her the other day. I was delivering flowers for Charlie, and I had a delivery there. She insisted I come in.
My goodness, how old must she be?
She's in her 90s.
Huh?
How old must she be?
She?
Yeah.
She's in her 90s.
90. Something in the 90s, yeah.
And what was Fat Lasher's real name?
Leland.
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 Okay, Leland.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you a question. His father's name was Elmer.
Yep.
What was his father's name?
That is a bad question. I don't know.
See, Lou doesn't know either.
He was
I think
a brother
I
to
have
Wilbur.
seen a Lewis, and I'll bet you he was a Lewis, and that's where Lou got his.
Well, that
Yep.
would make sense, yeah. It could be. I don't know.
See, one of them
He's
is...
wrong.
Yeah.
But Elmer and Wilbur were brothers.
Yeah.
Now here's the old house.
This
That,
one?
yeah, that, I shouldn't have mentioned, because I can't think of the people's name. Trudy. Her name was Trudy. Trudy. Anyway, years ago, I'm going back now to about 1910 or 11. And Trudy Ott, O-T-T, Trudy Ott. She went around town and begged money for a pipe organ in the Reformed Church. Nobody ever knew how much she collected or anything about it until, when was it? It must have been about 1919 or 20. Then a group of men in the Reformed Church decided they wanted a pipe organ. And it was brought up a little bit delicately that Trudy Ott had begged money. Nobody knew what she had. But they came and called on her, and she had the money, and quite a sizable sum.
Wow.
And that's how the pipe organ got into the Reformed Church.
Wow.
It started with this woman right here.
Now, Jay, you must have stories about this big old house on the left here where...
Yes, that was,
somebody told me.
they went down to Whispering Pines in South Carolina every winter.
Wasn't another Coons?
No, not a
No
Coons.
relation to Sanford?
Not a Coons. My mind don't click. What was their name? And I could see him right in front of me. Here on the corner was a big willow tree. And there was a spring up in there somewhere, and a pipe down that kept this watering source full of water. And everybody would drive their horses there to let them drink. Sanford Hover. This was Sanford Hover's place.
Oh.
And with that big willow tree, they always drove down to the Willow Spring.
That's what it was called,
That's
right?
the picture, postcard I have.
Have you? Yeah.
I didn't show it to you, I just asked you, and you told me right away.
Well,
The watering trough looked like a tombstone.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the one we thought.
Well,
Yeah.
that's where it was, right there.
Now, you want me to keep going straight on this road?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to do
All right.
where Jay's father used to live.
Okay.
Jay, is this old bunkhouse on this side an old place?
Well, this was a Rockefeller, Clarence Rockefeller. It was, before that, it was Dr. Smith.
Oh, is that where he
And
lived?
Dr. Smith was the doctor that delivered me, I was told.
Oh,
Dr. Smith was the one that woman came to visit me on her birthday. But Walt told me her house was that 3-story one next to the old schoolhouse.
Well, Dr. Smith lived right here. And then Clarence Rockefeller married the daughter, and then they lived there.
The daughter of the Smith,
Yeah, daughter of
and
the
then
doctor.
the Funks.
Daughter of the doctor.
What was the Funk's name?
Luther.
Luther Funk.
See, this used to be a grape vineyard in here. Richard took care of that for Dr. Lasher. He rented it. Richard asked him if he wanted to rent it to him. He said he didn't want any money for it. He just wanted it to be fixed up so that he could say this was Dr. Lasher's farm. Well, Richard did, and he made quite a bit of money because he got a lot of grapes off it. So Dr. Lasher said to him, we got to make different arrangements. We're getting too rich on our grapes.
Now, this one on the left. That's the one. My father called Nancy Hart, but Nancy Hart's father was a Coons. Jay, this one.
Yeah, Nancy Hart lived there.
But her father
Her
was
brother was a big gambler. They tell stories that men from town would meet him on the street in New York, and he'd be broke, and he'd borrow a few dollars. And the next day he was practically a millionaire. He was a big gambler.
No.
Nancy's brother.
But what was her father's name? He was a Coons.
I can't tell you. I don't know. Okay.
What was the name of the one that was a gambler?
Hart.
No, that was her married name.
Yes, yeah, Nancy Hart.
Well, then it must have been her husband that was the...
Yeah, Hover.
Was that a Hover?
Yeah, there were two Charles Hover. The one in the village owns a telephone company. This Charles Hover, the boy, Charles, was the gambler.
Was the father Charles, too?
I don't know. Don't know anything about the father.
All right, now the Charles Hover that was in...
No, he lived across from the school.
All right.
At least was...
Yeah, but it says that his father didn't want him to enlist because they lived on a farm. Now, was there a farm across the school?
No, maybe this was it. But when he was an old man, before he died, he lived in one of those houses across from the school.
Okay.
The next one to Stearns or the next to the next?
Yeah,
Well, this Nancy Hart was a cousin to Willis Lasher because he used to come up here and visit him. The Lashers got in theirs.
Well, they said that Lashers, and what else? Moores, and Rockefellers, they were the more names of those people than any others in the town, weren't there? There were a lot of Coons too, right, Coons?
a lot of them.
Yeah.
Margaret, you should know. Is that the house that Doc Lasher built back there?
No, we haven't come to it yet.
Oh.
Just before we come
Now this looks like it might be a
That's
pretty
where
old
the
house
boy-
too.
Please go slowly here.
Yep.
This is the house, Helen, where the boy, and he was a student. He was a classmate of Elsie Curley, and he was drowned at
That's what
Willow Lake.
Yeah.
I told you that was the... I thought it was out at Lake Taconic.
This was Roy Lasher.
So that Willow Lake, and they, she was on that picnic. They
And
went
his
out-
name wasn't his name Alan Lasher?
Yes.
Yeah, he drowned out at what lake?
Buell.
Buell. Lake Buell, that's right.
Well, if that was Elsie's class, then 2 or 3 classes all the high school must have gone on the picnic.
Probably. You know, how many could have been in it? Probably 20 altogether in the high school maybe, right?
Go very slowly.
Yep.
Here. There's on our right, there's a little dirt road that goes into the
We just
cabin.
passed it. We just passed it.
Built and put in his wife's name, and that's where his
Do you want me to back up? No?
Now we're going to come and see there's a lot of...
We're getting in your territory now,
I
Margaret.
thought that was...
Maybe it is, but there's another one right back there.
No, I don't know anything about that. This is the one that goes to the...
Oh, well, that's where Doc...
That's where he built his log cabin.
I see. That's back in here?
Right, I'm sure it goes in...
Yeah.
The other one back there, right across from that house.
Yeah, maybe they're building a house in it.
No, it's been there. That Kavanaugh girl lived there for years and years.
Now, the next place here is the Conrad Lasher homestead. That was where Willis. This is the old one. And in the back of this house, if you go a little bit ahead, you can see it. It's the old smokehouse. It's still there the way it was in the real old times.
Oh, yeah, it is.
See, it's made out of stone.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
This Bob that lives there is going to take me all through the house, and I went, and sometimes he's in the city. I was coming back from yard sales, and he's out in the yard waving at me, and I had to go to the bathroom so bad I couldn't stop.
Oh. Well, this is where Willis had his sign up. Over 235 years in the Lasher family.
Yeah.
Now, around this turn, we're going to come to the house that Willis built for his mother, so she wouldn't have to live in it anymore.
Oh. I mean, his mother lived here before he moved into it.
It's this one right here. And that's where he lived when he died.
He put the whole farm, all his property, the goose farm down on the other road, all in a tree farm.
Well, so we wouldn't have to pay taxes.
Never paid taxes until the property was sold. Then the taxes would have to be paid.
Oh, they did? Get the taxes?
How would ever come out, I don't know.
So the boy had it, he did not want to keep the place.
Yeah.
Maybe that was the reason why. Now, whose house was this one?
I don't know. Coupon lived there. Edward Coupon in my time.
Who lived there?
Well, who was it?
Edward Coupon?
Yeah, well. Now, wait a minute. There was a barn right here somewhere, Margaret, where the two families lived. Bob
Well, that
Smith.
was back on Tom's place, wasn't it? They lived in the
No.
barn?
Well, right across this house, right
It
in here.
was?
Yeah.
I didn't
There were
know.
two families. Bob Smith was one and his brother. And they each had a family, married, had a family, and they lived in this barn.
But after that,
It was fixed up nice.
No, I'll show you another house they lived in afterwards.
Uh-huh.
All in the back here, Willis owned, didn't he? Jay,
But
didn't Willis own all this property?
all this was all his.
Yeah.
Yes. He had a lot of property.
Well, but wasn't any good for houses.
No.
Oh,
Number
no,
one,
it goes
drops
down
it.
in the gully. It drops right off.
He thought he had a home. He was something,
Now, this one on the left, Jay,
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I'm anxious to hear
is this, it was originally a Lasher house. Because that's some Walt's relative.
Well, I wouldn't know.
But Bobby said Pete Kisselback lived here. Do you remember Pete Kisselback, Jay?
Sure. Yeah.
Did he live there? That's what Bobby
I
said.
don't recall it. Might be.
That had a drop roof, the old German way of building those houses in there. This family took it out all. On the other side of this, the roof came down almost to the ground.
I remember seeing that
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
There was a barn right here. Now, these people, I always thought, put all those picture windows in, took the old windows
They
out.
did.
And Bobby said no, Pete Kisselback did it.
Well, I felt bad when we tore off the back of it and changed that, because that really was an old house.
Parker Coons.
Parker Coons, that was his house.
Now, I want to tell Jay something. He's talking about that barn that Barton Smith lived in, the two-family barn.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, Barton Smith lived there on one side,
Yeah.
and Bernice, Tip's cousin Bernice,
Yeah.
and her family
Yeah.
lived in the other
They
side.
were the two
And
families.
this house, because I came to a party when I was about 13 or 14 here.
Yeah. But before that, they lived up there. That barn's gone.
Now, whose house did you say it was, Margaret?
It's Catherine and Parker Coons.
Parker was down at the cold storage one time and telling Wes Ryder he knew what hard times was. He'd been through it. Well, Wes says, I always heard that your father left you the farm and everything on it free and clear. That's right, he did. But the first year I owned it, I had to put a new roof on the barn.
Jay, do you remember the cedar trees that were planted
Yeah, I guess I
in
do.
this barn
I
down
do.
to that point? You know,
Yeah.
I was telling you about it, Marguerite. And every year, Parker sued the town because they spoiled his trees when he came around the turn. They said it cut off the way to Cedar Road. Every year he sued.
I had two bums working for me, picking fruit, and one of them got his bonus money from the Army, and he bought a car. They both of them got a little under the weather, and they drove through this hedge of
Oh
Parker,
my God.
and it ruined that particular spot. Parker never found out who done it.
But other people knew, huh?
Well, he was pretty ugly about it, but it was those two bums that worked for me.
Now, Margaret, one thing I want to know, where that schoolhouse was that burned down that you had to teach in somebody's living room.
It was over.
Well, will we come
Is this
to
an
it?
old place up here first?
I don't
That
think
was
this,
the
no.
tenant house from Parker Coons.
That was?
Yeah.
All right.
And we'll have to go around there by Warner's. I know exactly what I'm talking about that, but I can tell you the story. Now, this is Charlie Denegar's house.
This
No,
one?
no,
The next
no,
one, the
the
next
next little one, right in here. That was Charlie Denegar's, and he was a...
That's Sally Light, isn't it?
That's Sally Brooks.
Yeah,
Brooks,
she
yeah.
bought that place.
She wonders what we're doing here. She thinks we're going to come to see her.
And he was one of the undertakers, he and Otis.
Charles Denegar?
Yeah.
I thought the Undertaker place was that house up there.
It is. That was where the undertakers were.
I better go out and talk to her, because she'll wonder what we're doing.
All right, let me just pull off the road right in there then. Just hold on.
There's a truck coming the other way.
Yeah, let's just park it for a minute. Hi.
Marguerite Riter, Barbara Lasher, and that's Jay Moore.
Hello.
He has given us a tour, and he's telling us who used to own all the old houses, like yours was Charlie Denegar's.
Yes, and I think before that, I got some old records. There was somebody before Charlie Denegar landed.
Do you know who it was?
I think it's down the bank.
Oh. Anytime you just happen to be there, we'd be interested to know, but we don't want you to make any special trip.
Yeah, no, Charlie, yes. Well,
It's so glad to see you.
so you're taking it all down. Yes, it was, and Olive was his wife.
Yes. It was
Olive
Charlie's
was
wife.
Charles Denegar's wife, or
Yeah.
the wife man that lived before?
No.
No, Charlie Denegar's wife was Olive, and there was Sterling Fox's wife.
Oh, yeah.
Lauren.
You know,
Lord.
but there's somebody came in there. After all, Charlie Denegar didn't get a hold of this place until, what, 1900 or something like that, you know. And it's probably 100 years older than that, you know. Yeah, I had somebody in looking at the woodwork, and they dated it back to about 1840, some of the woodwork. So, That's about it. Are you taking that all down?
Yes.
From that thing?
Yes.
So, anyway, it was built.
Oh, she's going to tell me more.
The really old ones had fireplaces, and then they came to stoves. And this had stoves. It had about 5 stoves.
Yeah, but
By the time I got it, they put in oil heat. They'd gotten fancy. You know, and they had indoor plumbing. But if you want to try the outdoor plumbing, you can. It's still there.
we have the place up in the barn, but that's where they store the screens and the storm windows.
Yeah. Well, anyway, and that's Clyde Denegar's barn that's being made into a house, you know, by Bruce Bueller.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's the barn that went with Clyde Denegar's, and his house is sort of hidden by trees there. That's where the funeral home was. Well, you having a nice ride?
Yeah, we're learning a lot.
Oh.
And thank you so much.
Well, you're very welcome. Now, I'll stand here. I try to keep these bushes cut back, but I didn't, you know, I haven't that much energy as I used to have, so the people won't get clipped as they back out.
Thank you, Sally.
I'd like to watch myself, though.
Yes.
All right, here. Margaret,
Yes.
which was Lonnie Lasher's home?
We haven't come to that.
I
That's
thought
the
that
little
down
house.
here. Well, he was an undertaker. And Will Denegar bought him out.
Oh, was he here before Will Denegar?
Yep.
No. I'll have to get out my pen.
Here.
Thank you.
So your
So,
schoolhouse
hold it, folks. This is the.
All right, just wait a second.
This
Yep.
is Charles.
No.
No, this is,
William.
Yeah, here's where Will, because I can remember my father coming here about my grandfather's funeral.
Yeah, this is there's one of these front rooms right in here.
Mm-hmm.
but that barn up there, that's where they kept the coffins.
Yes.
And Clyde lived here afterwards?
Yes. I don't know where the new people were.
Now, you know, I have a death certificate from that Alonzo Lasher funeral home, 1888. And George Fox showed it to Harold Denegar when he came into the funeral home a couple of weeks ago when his wife passed away. He told George at the time, he said, I never heard of him. But then he saw George about a week or so after. He says, you know, I got thinking about that Alonzo Lasher. And he said, we bought the funeral home, the Denegars bought the funeral home from Alonzo Lasher.
Yeah.
And George has a feeling that they were across the street.
There's the little house we're coming to on that side.
Would be Alonzo Lasher.
Now, where was your schoolhouse, Margaret?
We haven't come to it.
No, I didn't teach there, but it was right across from the Denegars.
It was?
Yeah.
The one that burned?
Down below the hill
not the
there.
one that we were in. This is a different one.
But there was a schoolhouse across from the Denegars?
Yeah, yeah.
So this was
I
Alonzo
thought you taught
Lasher's.
there.
No, I didn't teach there. I was
Oh.
over in Clermont. This one is Alonzo's.
Oh, the one that's almost across from the church.
Yeah, that little house.
Boy, that's a tiny
Well, now,
house.
Margaret, this was Lonnie Lasher's.
I thought so.
I want to tell you a little humorous story.
Okay.
Well, pull over and listen.
Lonnie Lasher and Henry Wolven, who lived down there, were bitter enemies.
Henry who?
Henry Wolven.
Wolven, I've heard of
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I
And
know.
when my father and his brother were young boys, my father always told this story. Lonnie Lasher had just split a big heap of firewood up here. And on Halloween night, my father and his brother came here, and they carried armfuls of his wood down to Henry Wolven's and piled it up on his place.
Oh,
And every little ways dropped a stick so that Lasher could trace it. So that was their trick for Halloween.
Well, may I tell you a story about it?
Yeah.
He and a helper went out way over east on a very bitter, cold winter night to get a body. and they had a fresh snowfall. It was very deep and the going was hard, and they were going over with a sleigh and horses. And on the way back, they came fast because they were cold, and the body slid off of the sleigh. And when they got here, no body. So they had to go back and find it. Did you hear that?
No, never heard it.
I thought you did.
That's pretty funny.
Now, excuse me, but if you want, there's nothing there, but I can tell you about the old building if we go down here. But you don't
if
want
we go to the left?
Yes.
We gotta go to the right afterwards then.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
There's nothing, it's, Jay, it's where Eldridge Lasher's house was built. There was a real old German Palatine house there. You know anything about it?
No.
And they rented it to some Denegar.
News to me.
And then when Eldridge got married to Bess, they tore the old house down and built the house for Bess. Oh, here, girls, wait just a minute. We don't want to go too fast here.
Okay.
No, go on. No, we're coming to the Lasher estate.
Okay.
Don't want to miss that. Where that, this is where Virginia Lasher lives.
This was Clarence.
Yeah, that.
But on the left, it's Virginia Lasher.
This Clarence Lasher.
That was,
Well, who was
the gunsmith.
Yeah.
What was his name?
Oh, gee, his son. It's Clarence Lasher's son.
Yeah.
And that was built for them, I understand, wasn't it, Jay? And then they had the trouble, so he let her stay over there, and he went back with his wife.
I believe so. I can't think of his name. He was a gunsmith. Had a good one.
Well, he was well known.
Now, this one is
The old Lasher estate. This one right in
And this is this big house on the right.
Yeah, this one. Now, they wanted a drain in this house to go over to that barn because there was a lot of water up here. So they dug right across the road a very deep trough line across the road, and so the water drained down there. They filled that in with old sleighs, with old wagons, wagon wheels, a loom, cradles, and all that across this road, and filled it in and then topped the road over there. And I'd given anything in the world to have been able to get it up.
now which Lasher's? You say Lasher Estate, but it goes back to who?
To
Ephraim?
Ephraim Lasher. But it goes back beyond that because that was the old, where the old Lashers came. And the barn has been fixed up. The one back there, that's been all fixed up. This used to be all fruit in here. Can't think of anything else. Can't think of anything else to tell you. This was all fruit. And Clarence, that was Richard's uncle that owned that place when I married Richard. None of these houses were there.
I can't think of that gunsmith's name. I knew him well.
It probably come to you afterwards. You can tell us another time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like 9 o'clock at night, usually things come to me.
Just before you fall asleep, you'll think of
Right
it.
here, Ephraim Lasher's land stopped and Richard's started. And this is where the old gunsmith was. And that old house was right where that yellow house is ahead of us. And it had the slanted roof, and when they took it down, it was all filled in with hay, with straw.
Oh,
Do you know anything about it, Jay?
no.
It was right where that house was. See, that's
Yeah.
Eldridge's house.
Yeah.
Oh, it isn't now. And our land started here. And we owned all the rest of it. Well, we owned this also.
Boy, when you come on these back roads, if you haven't been over them for a while, you see a lot of new houses.
Oh,
Look at back there.
that's now there used to be an apple press. We better stop here.
Yeah.
There's your house. Now that's where Richard's father bought, and that house dates about 1820. But the under part of that is a lot older than that. It has the old Dutch oven and the big fireplace, and the wide boards in the cellar and all of that. But the upper part was much later, and that was a beautiful, beautiful house. The apple press was in the back of this and moored to there.
Now, is this the barn that had that old corner cabinet in it? That's in the Eckert house now?
Yes.
Or the old parsonage?
You went right in this door, and it was on the right side in there that we had. And Jay, it makes me heartsick to see this place. It has gone down so badly, hasn't it?
Well, that's the way when city people buy things.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Now, this was the Belind house. We can turn down here. This is the mother was it on it? No. This was our tenant house. But before that, it was the Belind house. And when you get right down here, that was where this road ended. And you had to go down this road to the Riffenbergs on the left. And there was a road that went across in the back of this woodlot here and came out. Those people could not get here. This is where that road ends.
So Lasher Avenue
This
and...
road ends, or was there a road in here?
Well, I think there was a road in there. I'm not sure. That goes back to where Cook Cars own now. But this is, when you came here, you had to turn here, go up there, and go Ryder,
Yeah.
Bobby Ryder. Because the Riffenberg house came first and Bobby.
Now, do you want me to go on
There
this
wasn't
road?
a road down this way?
All right.
No,
There
was
wasn't.
no road. We'll turn around and go back to the church.
Well, I want to tell you another little story then.
Okay.
Down there was the woods that belonged to
Yeah.
your husband, Richard,
Yeah.
and it had a lot of oak trees in it. And Richard was justice of the peace on the town board, and we needed oak plank for some of the old bridges yet. And you couldn't buy oak planking anyways. Richard says, I've got them, but I can't sell them to the town, being on the board. Well, we said we'll buy them from your wife, Margaret. So it showed on the books where we had bought so many oak plank from Margaret Lasher.
And she doesn't even know it.
He says,
Look at this house back
Yeah,
there.
well, that's the one that it's either the son or the daughter of the people who owned, like, they had a queer house.
the auditor says, what relation is this Margaret Lasher to your justice of the peace? Well, it's his wife. Well, we got reprimanded for that.
Is that right?
Oh, sure. He wrote it up in his report. Shouldn't do anything like that again.
Well, you know, when we were there, we had to get our milk over to the
Here's
crossroads.
my pencil on your shirt.
We had to get our milk over to the crossroads there where Hog Trough Road goes. And the roadman always opened our road. And Richard said, now Margaret, those fellas are pretty good for doing that. He said, now you have coffee and rolls for them. When they come back, we'll motion them in and give them coffee, which we did. And darn if somebody didn't report us that we were only asking them in so that when they drove in, they opened our driveway.
Sure.
I can't think of what her name was. She was quite a gabby woman. And now you're going to turn left.
Left and then right, aren't we?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how much of this you want to keep or delete, but there's a little story on that church my father used to call me.
Come
All
on.
right, little Mark, in the shade
They
and
had an
listen.
egg social, and every eligible young lady would pack a lunch, enough for two, Then she would boil an egg and wrap it and put her name inside the wrapper on the egg. Well, the young men would come and they'd pay $1 for an egg. Then, whoever egg they got, they had to take that lady to supper. And there was a certain lady here in town, nobody just cared for her. And when they would find her egg, they had the privilege of putting that egg back and buying another one until they got the egg they wanted to take to the proper lady. Well, every time her egg would come up, they'd put it back. Towards the end, Robbie Moore down here, he took that egg and threw it over the church shed. He said they'd made money enough on that egg. When her egg didn't show up, she couldn't understand it. She says that was a perfectly fresh egg. I can't understand where it went. It was over the church shed.
Oh, God. Do you want to go to see where I go?
I want to see where these places that Jay's talking about that used to be his father's and...
Yeah. Well,
So it keeps it going straight?
No.
That's over here.
Then you're going to turn right here, right, Jay?
Yep. Yeah.
It's right across from there.
Turn this up for a little while just to cool it off a lot.
What do you mean? Did they build a schoolhouse on the... Oh, yeah, well, that's where Mrs.
That sounds correct.
Yeah. Oh, I
That's
didn't
what
know
we
that.
thought.
I didn't know they rebuilt a school on the same old place.
Now, is that an old house over there, Jay?
That's the parsonage.
Oh, that's the parsonage. Okay.
And the kitchen is in Germantown, and the rest of the house is in Clermont. And where did I read just last week? They built the church there before the parsonage, and the minister lived with George Cronkite. That was my great-great-grandfather. But I don't know which house it was. I think it was Eddie Rushmore's house.
No, there must be a big story to the farm coming. Is this where you live, Jay?
Yep, down below. I lived
Well,
down.
whose was this one?
I was born down there. Now this was DeWitt's.
DeWitt
Father's
Farm?
mother. This is where my father was born.
Oh.
I'm curious, would you drive in that driveway there?
All right.
Drive around if it's open. Maybe
Okay.
it's not open. To get in a ways. Well, they had a fire in there, and it was never fixed up after the fire. DeWitt's daughter, Hazel, married Minor Rockefeller. Minor Rockefeller's father was a very wealthy man. Hazel Moore's father, DeWitt, was very wealthy. And it was the talk of the town when those two young people married. They was uniting those two fortunes. DeWitt had the Smith brothers, caterers, come up from Poughkeepsie to cater this wedding. I was there at the wedding. Beautiful thing. Both families had plenty of money. Well, there was a lot in between. But when Charlie Rockefeller died, he left everything to his son. His son, well, he let things go. DeWitt's boys let everything go here. Both families lost the money that they had. When they died, well, you might say they didn't have anything, but they were wealthy families one day. My father and DeWitt, when they were young boys, DeWitt married, so did my father. My father went down there in the tenant house. He started to raise a family, DeWitt did here. And he set the whole thing out in fruit. They had grapes down there. They was one of the first ones in town to raise grapes. They picked them and put them in sugar barrels, shipped them down on the boat from North Germantown, because sugar barrels would hold the juice. They was two of the boys where their father criticized them for ruining good rye land, setting fruit on it. Well, they finally decided there wasn't enough here for both families. So DeWitt was going up and buy a farm, well, Big Sanford's, as we were talking about coming. He was going to buy that. But something he didn't or couldn't or something. So my father heard about the Gale place for sale. So he was going to buy that. They're working down here, hoeing corn. And they got talking about how would they settle. Well, the two boys decided they would put a price on this farm and cut it in half. And the one that stayed here, give the other one that half. So they took their finger and they marked figures in the soil there, in the corn ground, what this place was worth. And they both marked exactly the same thing, $40,000, which in those days was a fortune. Big money, big farm. So my father had $20,000 when he came up there and bought the Gale place for $18,000. Well, he had to set that all out. Feed grapes and so on. And bought a team of horses. You might say had to start over. Where DeWitt here had everything all set. And he went right on into making the money. Well, my father made money for a few years. But when my mother sold that place in 1941, she sold it for $10,000. It was sold twice or three times after that for $10,000. Then Bob McKellar, who's there now, he came along and he bought it from Mr. and Mrs. Yarn. He bought it in two different parcels, but altogether he had $60,000 in it. He sold it here a year or so ago for $495,000, a piece of it on the river. That's how property values jump. But here's where my father started, right here. Now, down below here, I'll show you where an old house is, and I think that's one of the places you're interested in. That's where the two old maid aunts lived, who were sisters to my grandfather boy.
Notice the garage. Look at the garage, how beautiful that was.
Well, that was criticized too. Copeland from Lindisco built that for DeWitt. Well, when DeWitt was rolling in the money, he married his second wife. He bought her a baby grand piano. And he fixed the inside of that house. You ought to see it. Beautiful. That dining room was all paneled, beautiful. They had a maid. And we were there to dinner one time, and his second wife would tingle the bell to call the maid. Oh, it's big stuff. It all went to profit.
Jay, was his second wife the one who was such a good
musician?
player of the...
well, it was Grady Traver, the minister's daughter.
Yeah, I think that's the one who was...
She taught music.
Yeah.
She was a good organist.
That's what they said.
Yeah.
Now, did that driveway go right around past
Yeah,
the
there was an ice house in the back, but we couldn't get in there to see it. Well, I thought the road would go that far, it didn't. And down in there somewhere was a pond. And there's where the boys took in ice and filled their ice house every winter. One Sunday morning, DeWitt is dressed to go to church. He sang in the choir, so did my father. And there was a flock of ducks on that pond. He went back to the house with his good clothes, got the gun, goes down there, sneaks up on the ducks, and shot, went over backwards in the mud.
Oh,
Now down in there is where that old house was.
that's what I told you.
Yeah, this is what Margaret wants to know.
Wait.
All right, just let me pull away from the turn a little bit.
Was that where the two women lived?
That's where
All
the
right.
2 old age sisters of my grandfather-in-law lived. And my father's sister, Maggie, was a lot older than the boys. She was born first, of course. And she inherited the jewelry from these 2 old maids. And later in life, when Charlie Ham married her daughter, she took those earrings of the old ladies and had tie pins, stick pins made out of them. I had 2, and Charlie had 2. I got one yet. They're beautiful, I call them. I cherish them. But they came from these 2 old ladies here.
That was a real old house.
I guess it was.
Right in there. And there was a well there quite a while, Jay, but I don't know where it is now.
Oh,
The
what?
grass is up so high, it could be
Well, there
there.
was a
You would-
Did
barn
it set way back from the road, or was it pretty close to the road?
No, it was back a little, about as far back as this house.
There's
I
one
see.
big tree back there. Would it be back where that big
No,
tree
No.
wasn't that
wasn't that
No,
far?
no, not that far back. Now here's where I was born.
Such a house.
Yeah, it's been sold a couple times and fixed. That was the tenant house before they moved into that. Yeah, Pauline and I were both born there. Adam, my younger sister, was born up the other place where the fellas lived.
Now, are these additions on each end of the house, Jay,
Yeah.
or were they there when you were born?
No, there's like a shed here where this piece is. And I was a pretty young boy, but I remember I had a cage with some white mice in there. And I'd go up there and play with them white mice. That would be 80 years ago. Yeah.
Now, tell me, was it always your grandfather's property, that house? Was it
Yeah.
always a tenant
Yeah.
house?
Well, I'll tell you another little humorous story called, maybe you want to delete it. Can you delete on that?
Yeah, but I'm not gonna.
Well, if this don't go over, you better delete it. My grandfather had a flock of sheep, 100 sheep. And he said to the 2 boys one day, it's time to put the buck with the sheep. And they was to go up to his brother, up to Jemima's farm, and get a buck, wild buck. So they brought the buck down and put it in the lot with 100 sheep. The next morning, the buck laid by the gate, dead. That later, 62 of those sheep had lambs. Leave it in or take it out, use your own. But it's a true story.
Oh, goodness.
Well, it's things like that my father passed down to us.
But all those years I would ask about that old house, all they and I think it's a crime not to tell these stories.
Oh, I do.
No.
That's why I'm supposed to have my tape recorder.
That's where Bondi married Peg, Helen.
Mm-hmm.
That's that house.
What? Which house?
The one on the corner there,
Oh, no.
on the turn.
That Terry woman lived there.
Well, that's where
Did
that's where
Peg
the
live
Pegs.
with the Terrys?
I guess so. She and
That woman was her bridesmaid when she got married.
yeah.
She must have lived with them then,
Well,
because they built the house.
I presume so. Now
She
here,
died.
starting up there where I was born, down through here was 100 acres. That all belonged to the Livingston family. And my grandfather and later the boys, they rented this from the Livingstons for pasture lot. It's 100 acres in there. Now it's all split up.
What did you use it for? Pasture?
He had pasture. Now, where was the old goose farm, Margaret?
That we just went by. That was Doc Lasher.
Yeah, Doc Lasher.
Yeah.
He owned quite a lot of acreage.
Yeah.
Well, the Goose Farm did have a house on it?
Well,
Yeah, I don't know. He always rented it, didn't he?
yeah, but there were a lot of little hit-and-miss houses.
No.
Well, that's as far as Jay, where should we go now?
Well, we didn't go past that building that was the schoolhouse yet, did we? You said
Yeah,
Mrs.
but
Hinken lives there?
I know where it is, across from the Werners. Do you know where the Hinkins live? But I thought they built the school, a second school, in a different place. No, it wasn't. Yeah, that was probably it.
But you know, Marge Grafton taught there ahead of me.
That's a beautiful orchard. It belongs to the Potts boys. That's a nice orchard.
Now, whose house was this one here on the left?
In my time, Bill White lived there.
White?
White, W-Y-K-E. He married Carlson, married Carlson, Dorothy Carlson. They went to California, and then he sold it. Before that, well, it was, I'll think of it. Before that, Tompkins Coons married Beulah Coons. Beulah's folks lived here.
Bathrick. She was a Bathrick.
That's it, that's it. That was a Bathrick. You're right.
Now, whose house is this over here on the right? Because that's a pretty old house too, isn't it?
In my time, that was the Boyce. Boyce. What was it? You put in New York. Did a good job. I don't know.
All right. Ladies, where do you want to go next?
You getting tired, Jay?
I don't know. I don't care.
Are you tired? No, he says.
I want to start down by the railroad station and do the ones from...
Do you want me to go on 9G or you want me to go across the road?
Let's go on 9G.
Anything you want to say, Jay, about any of these houses, just say it.
No. I don't know too much.
Gosh, yes, know too much. We're picking your brains.
Yeah.
Now, this is a Lasher place here, isn't it, on the right? Wasn't that a Lasher house?
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, Lasher.
but that was late.
Uh-huh.
What else still live there? Last year she was still there.
Now, Jay, my grandfather, John Huffman, he told me one of the few stories that I remember.
Yeah.
And I'm